So my name is Edvardas Sileris. I am head of Europe and Cybercrime Center at Europol. Our main mission is to coordinate law enforcement actions against cybercrime, serious organized crime, terrorism, and financial crime. And from Europol's perspective, we are addressing this issue from two sides, cybercrime and economical crime. So when it's more technical, it comes under umbrella of cybercrime. When it's social engineering, no matter if it is the main vector, it comes under umbrella of financial economical crime. So we have only 30 minutes, and with that, I think that our panel needs to introduce themselves. And let's start from the end. So.
Good morning. My name is Karen Seifert. I am from the Department of Justice in the United States, and I'm the director of the Scam Center Strike Force. So I work for Judge Pirro, who you just heard from, directing our actions against transnational organized crime in Southeast Asia along all the lines that you just discussed. So I'll keep it brief.
Thank you. My name's Nick Sharp. I work for the National Crime Agency in the UK. And I work in an organisation within that called the National Economic Crime Centre, which is a collaborative team with financial regulators, online safety regulators, as well as law enforcement, policing, and industry, all part of one big happy family.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ricardo Toscano. I'm the head of the Cybercrime Office of the Portuguese Public Security Police. You're welcome from Portugal. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Hayatudeen Bello. I'm the director of the National CERT, which is a Computer Emergency Response of Nigeria, domiciled under the Office of the National Security Advisor's Office. So basically, what we do is we look at ROC infrastructure for scams and then make sure that we have very good protocols to take them down. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, GASA, for the invitation. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Rafael Ramos. I came from a Brazilian law enforcement agency, which is responsible to protect the information integrity in Brazil, especially related to public policy. So in our experience, we are defining how interconnected are these two phenomena, disinformation and frauds and scams online, for impersonation and phishing schemes related to health, to education, to social security services that are damaging our citizens. So we are here to present some quickly perspectives on our mixed approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So straightforward, let's dive to questions. So Bello and Nick, fraud is sometimes considered as a national security issue. Would you subscribe to it? And if yes or no, so justify, please.
Sure, of course. So the UK recognised or designated fraud and scams as a national security threat in 2023, which is a pivotal moment for how our entire system domestically and internationally kicks into gear. To just put that into a bit of context, that does put fraud and scams on an equal footing operationally with counter-terrorism or counter-espionage. So it's a big moment for any nation to designate something like fraud and scams as national security. From there, it kind of kicks in a whole government, a whole society effort. And the UK, you heard Andre mention earlier today, has had now 2 fraud strategies. The first started to mobilise our national and international law enforcement efforts, which I'll talk about briefly what that means in practice, and our latest fraud strategy, which was published in April, and that's really building on that energy. When it comes to the kind of 3 pillars of how this all fits together from a national security perspective, firstly, most nations, possibly every nation, has a complex law enforcement environment. So the UK, I'm sitting by an American, so this will sound like a small number, but we have 43 police forces, which we think is a lot of police forces. You guys have got a lot more. But it starts to give all of the law enforcement community that common purpose and a common strategic approach. So a really good working example of that in practice is together with the City of London Police, the National Crime Agency, do an intensification every year and now almost every day, where we mobilise UK law enforcement against domestic-based fraud and scam operators in our shores. So about 30% of fraud which hits UK victims comes from within the UK itself. We've arrested about 2,000 people since that initiative began and seized £70 million of fraudulent assets, which will hopefully then find their way back to victims as they work through as cases. So national security mobilises that domestic effort, but it also mobilises our public-private partnerships. So working with many of my colleagues in the room, we have some really good, strong, permissive legal gateways in the UK, which when something is recognised as serious organised crime, which is what happens when you designate it as national security, we can start working with industry in ways which we couldn't before. Now that might be through data sharing or for cooperation or working on problems together to identify what industry can see. So we've done some work with Google in the last year or two, and many of you would have seen this guide which we've written, which enables industry to signpost from your data and your intelligence where you're seeing fraud actors operating, be they UK or overseas. And that really, and Bello will I'm sure touch on this, we can do some police-to-police work internationally to bring people to justice even when they're crossing borders. And then in the latest fraud strategy, we've announced something called the Online Crime Centre, which you heard referenced, I think, in Giles's session. So the Online Crime Centre is about facilitating public-private partnership at scale, not only to identify ways to design fraud out, but how do we start to share UK intelligence and UK policing holdings and material and data through intermediaries like Global Signals Exchange, Stop Scams UK, Cyber Defence Alliance. There's many people who do this kind of thing, but how do we get that material which we're not going to use for law enforcement, but is just as valuable to you, out to you to take action? And then, so public-private partnership has really kicked into gear. And last but not least is then international cooperation. So this opens opportunities for police-to-police contact. So we've got a memorandum of understanding with Nigeria, which facilitates some incredible opportunities to start taking global law enforcement action together, which is a seamless segue for Bello to pick up the story.
Yes,
Might I? Oh, sorry. Before I wanted to just add, not to
Seamless,
step on
Karen.
you, but I just wanted to add. I think I really commend my UK colleagues. I think it's very important in this threat to have a speaker who's going to acknowledge the problem as a national security issue, because for a long time, government has sort of thought of fraud as a sort of victim-centered issue, and I think rebranding it as a national security issue allows the elevation of that conversation. Certainly that is at the Scam Center Strike Force how we view it, but I will just point out in March of earlier this year of 2026, President Trump signed an executive order which also directed all US government agencies to highlight this problem and to take it as a national security problem. And that interagency effort is being directed by the White House and by the National Security Council. And so that's a really big step for the US government to elevate this to a different level of conversation, both within government and with interagencies working together with our foreign partners and our especially in our Five Eyes working group, but also with our private-public partnerships, because those private entities now can work not only with prosecutors like myself, but also are working directly with the counterparts at the White House who are looking at this as a national security problem. So I just think that's a really important governmental decision to bring up the level of the conversation.
Thanks, Karen. And Nick, to butter your point on the fact that we have seen fraud from a perspective of transnational crime, and importantly, what we see in Nigeria is the convergence of criminality and then state actors coming into play. We all agree that Sahel region for us is a very volatile area where you have a lot of terrorism activities, and that funnels the fact that a lot of those financing actually comes from initially from crowd sourcing activities, which we see a large number of diasporas, for instance, actually putting in money to just to support either separatist or terrorism organization. Nigeria, coming from the fact of ICRG, I think we have learned significantly well on how to tackle that. And Mr. Thompson have made a very clear representation saying that the ME, which is the next mutual evaluation that is coming towards most of the countries going through the 5th evaluation, have highlighted the fact that fraud is a very important component, and that requires an escalatory approach. I'm of always the opinion that fraud should not be only looked at from law enforcement perspective, but rather putting in strategic measures and countermeasures for preventive mechanisms to be in place. And I think the recommendations from FAT have actually pointed out some of these actions that need to be taken and laid out for you to be able to domesticate those recommendations. So international cooperation is key now, as cooperation, which Nick highlighted, that operationalize some of that provision of the MOU between the UK government and Nigerian government with a private sector partner like Meta. There was a scam center down in the Delta State, which is the southern part of Nigeria, that initially the intelligence came in from the platform, which is Meta, through the NCA, and which had a joint operational effort to bring down that scam center. This goes to demonstrate the fact that if we work together and cooperate together across borders, we will have an effective countermeasures against scam centers. For us, I think it's very important to understand that we came in early in terms of dealing with scams. I'm not promoting the Nigerian prince, but I'm sure a lot of you have received one email or the other from the Nigerian prince. The Nigerian prince have become a brand. So it's no longer Nigerian, but it's a global phenomenon now. So you find Indian scammers or Southeast Asian scammers actually using that branding of the Nigerian prince. 2024 alone, Nigeria had a conviction of 4,111 fraud-related cases, which is quite significant. We brought down the whole scam center in Lagos last year with about 700, more than 700 people arrested, and almost 200 of them are foreigners. So scams are no longer local, but scams are global. So, and scam already needs, which was already escalated to a hybrid threat and involved and attached to our national security strategy. So we look at it from the angle of financing of other activities outside just the consumption of the proceeds of crime. And importantly, what I see as major gap within our own infrastructure is the ability to build a kind of a kill chain protocol where the most important component of scam is actually the proceed. So we need to work towards making sure that there are protocols that actually stops the movement of the proceed of scam. And what happens to the victim, what the victim is really interested is really getting back his money. I mean, Christine have made it very clear to us what the kind of trauma she went through in terms of what she lost, and then the emotional damage that has gotten to her. But what Christy will have loved to do and get is really get her money back.
Thank you very much. Let's switch to Brazilian side. So please, what you can share with us.
I would like to share 3 points quickly. We are focusing on the entire chain, fraud chain. As mentioned before, we started with the entry point, the essential point of the digital ads. In addition to the obviously the tech infrastructure, we are trying to deal with the domains, the registers, and finally the finance aspect. We are trying to work together with central bank. Maybe you have heard about the PIX, the instant payments in Brazil. We're trying to improve the mechanisms for reimbursement, the victims, and also to block the fraudulent accounts. In addition, we are really committed to the principles of the public-private partnership as measure the fraud Global Fraud Summit and here as well. And I can share a concrete example of this partnership. A few weeks ago, we signed with Meta a judicial settlement, especially focused on prevent the misuse of the logo or the official symbols of governments, of programs, and also the image, the manipulated images and videos from public figures, the so-called, we know the celebrities. And so we are implementing this settlement with inputs of our images, official images, and the facial recognition of these authorities, and also data sharing. We are obtaining access to all the websites and destination URLs, even those that never went online. So we believe that this kind of cooperation is essential to target especially the ads problems. Finally, I would like to mention that this week our Supreme Court in Brazil is about to conclude a landmark judgment on our framework of civil rights on the internet, especially one point related to the duties and the responsibilities of the providers, respect to severe crimes, terrorism, and this pedophilia, and so on. But a specific point that is related to our summit here is related to the liability for the social, the paid content, illicit ads and posts, which means that in that case there is a kind of presumption of knowledge of the content, which means that companies could be liable for this content. We really consider this a turning point, a shift for this conversation, and could be maybe have impact on other jurisdictions as well. So in terms of, we really agree, no? We are talking just like a multi-layered phenomenon. We need to raise awareness, to talk with educational, like a multi-agency approach. But for our side, we are really engaged of these kinds of cooperation, and we do believe that we can fight together.
Thanks a lot. Just to conclude, as I understood, everyone subscribes that actually we shouldn't address alone, but actually we should involve industry, governments, law enforcement, banks, platforms, etc. And Ricardo, we as Europol just published a position paper regarding ID spoofing. And this is a emerging threat because actually people are scammed and actually they really trust in numbers which they see on their phones. So what do you think about it and what Portugal is doing about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, ID spoofing, it's a real problem, not only in Portugal, but for all around the world. In the case of the Public Security Police, in Portugal, we have different law enforcement agencies. In the case of the Public Security Police, we have some competence, criminal investigations competence, for example, about cyber-enabled crimes that we are talking sometimes about phishing and in the specific case of spoofing. For example, we not only work in the criminal investigation, but also we work a lot in prevention and awareness campaigns. So, for example, the Public Security Police, we did in a few months. Now we have a partnership between with the private sector, with innovation, new innovation app to detect the fraud schemes by telephone calls and messages too. For that app, it's anonymized with the modus operandi that the police give to them, and then they can detect that spam. Now they are working with the EA, they are training the EA, and we can publicize the app that is in Portugal is the Guardião, in English the Guardian. They are the two youngster Portuguese. The last February they won the hackathon in Germany. So it's kind of like that, some measures like that that the public security police, with the private partners, with academy, we are working not only in the criminal investigations, but also about the prevention. So the prevention in a lot of our awareness campaign, it's very important for all the society. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Probably it's true because traditional approach from law enforcement, investigate, arrest. But here it's about how to prevent and how to scale this prevention. So for each of you, actually, maybe last remarks regarding key message which you want that audience will take from our panel. So please.
Again, I think we have to tackle this as a mixed approach, but I think we could add that, as mentioned before, the ads are now a kind of a blind spot in this conversation. So we need to tackle these open doors and raise the bar to the scammers. And beside that, obviously, this cooperation with cross-section and cross-jurisdictions as well are the natural path to tackle this phenomenon. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's quite important to highlight the fact that the virtual assets plays a very critical role in terms of how this process moves. And what I want to see is regulatory gap, operational gap needs to be closed down, which means that the private sector needs to fill in that gap for us to be able to have more effective and an efficient system to stop the scammers. And like I said, I'm more inclined into the preventive measures and mechanisms rather than reactive when the scams happen. We should find a kind of a fill in the gap solution to fit into those gaps that are provided both from regulatory angle as well as operational angle. And there's no one that fits into that gap like the private sector. So the PPP drives and the drivers needs to be in place for us to be able to fight these menace.
From our side, I think the empowerment of all the society and all the authorities, the empowerment that we say in Portugal sometimes, the digital literacy, I think can be the most important bet to prevent, in this case, not only the online fraud schemes, but of course the fraud schemes too. Because the criminals, always they are developing new technology, so we think we need to grow up, we need to empowerment all the society of more digital literacy. Thank you.
I want to mention victims. So from a law enforcement perspective, I don't know if nation to nation, but certainly in the UK, only 1 in 10 victims will report to us. They're much more likely to report to industry. And we heard that incredible victim experience earlier, as we do at all GASA summits. And I think it's just really key for all organisations to put victims at the heart of what we do. And remember that these are devastating crimes, and these are victims of crime. And there's too often we hear about strategies and initiatives where the victim is the last people we speak about. So if an organisation is going to make a public comment about fraud, it's really important that the first thing that victims hear you say is you're appalled by it and you're determined to fight it, because victims want to hear that determination, not excuses about that they've made a mistake or how the criminal has managed to manipulate a system. We need to get across our determination that we are going to go after our adversary and we're going to respect the victims and fraud and we're going to support them across the entire system.
So I agree with all my colleagues. I'll say for us, it's a lot about ingenuity and creativity with respect to those same exact things. So I'll just make 3 notes on that. First, when we're talking about public-private partnership, I mean, the US government has long gotten what voluntarily disclosed information from providers, but now we've really moved into a more innovative space where we're sitting down with providers and talking and disclosing information between each other about common issues and common targets. So Judge Pirro referenced our Disruption Week, where she hosted more than 10 private industry partners to come to the Department of Justice, to sit in the room with us, to look at specific targets in Southeast Asia at the same time. And throughout that few days together to really grow in the way in which we're working together, and we saw some very, very positive results just in a matter of days. Secondly, when we're talking about ingenuity and information and innovation, working with our colleagues from other jurisdictions. We have, of course, long histories working with other countries, but now I think we're really pushing to work in a more collaborative and hand-in-hand manner. So from the United States perspective, if a scam center is going after Americans, they're probably also going after British, Australian, Canadian victims as well. So through our collaborative working together in a more creative way, we're talking about actually sharing more information to allow each other to best go forward and in parallel ways. So I think that's also more of a creative, innovative way rather than just the typical, I'll send you information and good luck. And then thirdly, again, I totally appreciate your comment with respect to public disclosures and helping public understand the problem. And traditionally in law enforcement, we wait till the very end of a case to talk about that case. We wait till someone is in handcuffs or there's a verdict to talk about that case. We are rethinking the way that we do that. We want to talk about these things early. We want to get out there in advance of even an arrest to make sure the public knows what the crimes are, how they are being victimized, because it's only through that literacy of the public and that education of the public that we can start to stem the tide. We need individuals online, especially older individuals, to know what this threat is and to be on guard for that threat, and we need the people around them to also help them learn. And through that public education, which comes through disclosing our work and disclosing it and talking about it as a national security problem, that's how I think we can really help move the ball in a creative and innovative way.
Thank you very much. I believe that everyone agrees that we have developed excellent way how to cooperate human to human. Probably next step should be taken how to develop machine to machine cooperation with industry, that we can prevent at large, and because criminals are extremely good in scaling. So I think that we as law enforcement not so far, but I think with wonderful partners, I see Steven from Microsoft, we launched first cyber intelligence extension program, and they placed their staff within Europol, and we saw that actually it's possible to scale. So here's the main thing, and I believe it's key way to success. Also, I see Bitdefender. It's also cooperation is amazing between our entities. So I believe it's such kind of summit is really a way how to develop this in the beginning human to human, but end goal probably is machine to machine, our systems to your systems. And if we prevent it, I think it's much better instead of investigating. So thanks a lot, wonderful panel. I was in the most comfortable chair because I didn't need to do anything. You did everything. So thank you very much. And for all of you, enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you.